Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining my 25th episode of National Cannabis News with me, your host, Cassin. We're going to go ahead and talk about the things that we talk about every week. I'm excited to share with you guys more on the proposed rules here in Michigan, as well as about a new study on the science of how cannabis impacts your brain, what's going on with the first portion of the public hearing on rescheduling, as well as the cannabis bust from around the world. I think that it is great news that we're having fewer busts in California and New York this past week. And I'm sad to see that there is a huge international bust in Thailand for people trying to export to the European Union and the United Kingdom. It just goes to show that when people don't have access, they're going to find access. And that leads to people getting arrested and ending up in prison, which nobody wants. In this case, we have a number of people who were involved, and it looks like they, were growing cannabis legally in Thailand, which has been a thing for, 4 or 5 years now. But you can't export. And certainly you can't export to countries that don't have importation rules, right? There are countries that can export cannabis, medical cannabis, that are, under the World Health Organization's agricultural programs. And they can import those pharmaceutical grade products into countries that allow those imports. The United States doesn't, for instance, but many European countries do. And I believe Canada does, Australia does. Most of these places are accepting materials from other states. So this is just one instance where, clearly people want access to this product, to this plant, that many people have access to around the world, but not everybody agrees. And I feel like that's important. I am happy to say that it looks like maybe some of the bigger crackdowns that we were seeing on unlicensed traditional market operators on the East and West Coast may be slowing down, at least slowing down enough that the media isn't talking about them all the time. I'm always glad to see that is the case. For the rest of us here in the US, you may have been watching, certainly if you've been listening to my show, you know that the DEA is considering rescheduling cannabis in the United States from Schedule 1, which is for only those products that are super dangerous, habitual, and have no medicinal benefits, down to Schedule 3, which are for products that have medicinal benefits but are still potentially habit-forming, so they need some controls and monitoring. Hey, Yessie, woo, I'm so glad to see you. Thank you for coming on the show today. It is the 25th episode of the show. I remember you were here for my very first show, and so I am glad to see you here today. Thank you so much for being here. So the first public hearing happened. If you guys are interested in watching the video, you can. It's on YouTube. I am trying to add it to... nope, that didn't work. I need to do something else to copy the link. Here is the link to it on YouTube, so you can go watch. This is 2 hours of people saying that they will come to the next hearing to speak on behalf of cannabis consumers or against, because there are a lot of prohibitionists that are going to be testifying at these hearings. It was very nice to see some people that I really appreciate. Shane was there. Kashid was there. There were a lot of professionals who were there. There were scientists who were there. There were a lot of prohibitionists who were there as well. I thought it was quite interesting that at the very beginning, the government, who has to be there for their own hearing to defend themselves, was not sure they were going to be available. It's the little things that bring you joy when you're literally watching 2 hours of video that is very drivel. Not that you shouldn't watch it. I think you totally should. There's definitely some moments, like the moment when the National Cannabis Industry Association's defense about why they should be allowed to come to the hearing, the judge, who apparently has been quite a stickler with most people, said it was some very excellent lawyering in order for them to be able to show how members of the National Cannabis Industry Association would be negatively impacted by rescheduling. And not just because we wish they were descheduling. I know. It sounds crazy, but it's true. It was nice to hear, an award winner, just like myself, be told that he was amazing, because we all know that he's amazing. He's been doing this good work for decades. I was glad to see his face, or I guess the back of his head, on the video. That you didn't really get to see anybody's face because it was coming from like behind the podium. You got to see the judge only, and like the judge's aides. But anyway, you can totally watch that. I put the link in. Feel free to go out and see that. We are going to be seeing more on this January, February, March, and in the coming months. It sounds like a lot is going to happen between now and say March. And in addition, the DEA is now also being sued over the process because some people are saying that they were improperly talking to prohibitionists and they're keeping those conversations secretive. I don't know whether those allegations are true or not, but somebody thinks that they're true enough. Thank you, Shane, to go out and say, hey, we're going to sue for this specifically because we think that this process should be done transparent. And it's not transparent if the DEA is having meetings and communications with select prohibitionists and not having the same kind of conversation with everyone else. Again, guys, it's the DEA. Of course they're prohibitionists. I don't think anybody expected this to be a fast, swift process. I know there were people who were talking about it, but, I was thinking another, 2 years before we get through this. I'm just happy that we're actually having the conversation. When I started advocacy for cannabis consumers in the late 90s as a member of Students for a Sensible Drug Policy, there was no way. Like, they didn't even come close to putting forth a new rule that then needs to go into public comment and then needs to go to a hearing. That was just not part of the cards. You couldn't hardly even get legislators to talk to you. And now we've had 2 candidates for president say that they were open with these kinds of things. They had, we've had super pro cannabis people be put forth for Trump's new cabinet. Some of those people have already stepped down. But, that's definitely been happening. These are conversations that, I'm not sure I ever expected in my lifetime. I was going to keep advocating for it. It feels a little bit like I remember being a young gay kid and fighting actively just to be able to, like, stay in school. Because that was the 90s as a gay youth, right? It's not like it is now. And how much of my life it took to be the advocate. How many school boards did I have to talk to? How many times did I have to go talk to the governor or ask to talk to the governor and be denied? How many times did I write letters? How many protests did I go to? How many pride festivals did I go to where we were speaking before, after, trying to get as many elected officials and media out there to say, hey, like, we're regular people. Like, we're not crazy folks that everyone seems to think that we are. It feels a little bit like that, so I'm glad to see momentum. At least that's how it feels to me, like momentum. And I'm super glad to be sharing that here. Yes, he says, if not for the prohibitionists, a lot in the DEA would not have a job. That is so true. When I think about that the DEA hasn't existed for that long. Sometimes I feel like people are like, oh, these government institutions, they've been around for like centuries. Decades, yes, but not centuries. And in that entire time, how much money has been spent on arresting people, on tracking people, on keeping people in prison. We're talking about hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars at this point in this war on drugs, which is over 85% of that war on drugs has been specific for this plant, for cannabis plants. A plant which science is now showing was never as dangerous and always had medicinal benefits, which they knew when they put the rules in place, but they did it anyway, right? So, like, we're talking about, the government being able to come out and say, we were wrong all that time ago, and we would like to make amends, and we would like to change these things. Now, whether or not we'll actually have the political will to follow through with legislative change and having those legislative changes, expunge everyone's records and I don't know, even make reparations to the communities and the people that were harmed by this. I can't say that those things are going to happen. But stopping it from continuing to happen, it looks like it's on the horizon. And that gives me a very large amount of joy. And I hope it does for a lot of other people too. Okay, so something else, guys. I know I talk about the science of cannabis a lot. And I'm sure people are like, hey, why are we still talking about the science of cannabis? Because every week there is something new. And this week, I am really excited to say that there was a scientific study, a longitudinal study as well, okay? Looking at potential cognitive decline, okay, in males that consume cannabis, okay? And they started looking at it in the early 20s, so mid-adolescence for the males, and they're now looking at it in late in life, so 60s and above, right? They looked at over 5,000 users, include all of the users were in the longitudinal study. They all said yes that they would do it. This longitudinal study is years now, okay, guys? So when they started, they were 22, and they're now in their 60s. Okay, so a 40-year-long study, okay? And what they found was not only does cannabis not cause cognitive decline, but what they actually found was that cannabis users, sporadic and not sporadic, had significantly less cognitive decline than non-users. Now, about 6 weeks ago, we reported that that was also seen in Ohio, at Ohio State University, especially for people struggling with dementia, that if you had been using cannabis, taking a puff or so a day during your early life, that in the end of life, you would have less cognitive decline and less potential for dementia than others. This was what was seen at Ohio State. Now, here's another study that's showing that this is the case. So the crazy thing to me is that with all the things that have been said about cannabis making you stupid, cannabis making you lazy, I mean, the prohibitionists have said some pretty crazy stuff for decades, right? To have the scientific data come out and say, well, actually, it's just the opposite. Actually, it helps you maintain your cognitive abilities. Seems like a pretty big deal to me. I think that the scientists that are now being able to do more of this work, now clearly this work started a long time ago. The work is important from a standpoint of being able to say, here's all these things that non-science-based prohibitionists were worried about. And because they were worried about these things, they imprisoned hundreds of thousands of people, right? Were actually false. Okay? So just one more reason to undo these wrongs. One more reason to create a system of expungement. One more reason to consider reparations. Because we're talking about, millions of people's lives that have been turned upside down and are imprisoned. We're talking about 250,000 people imprisoned just last year. We're talking about 30,000 people who have been imprisoned in the federal system for years, some of which who are currently imprisoned for life. And one of the reasons they said that we should put those people in prison is because giving people access to this drug was going to make them stupid, was going to cause cognitive decline. And guess what? Now here we have two separate studies done by two separate sets of scientists with two separate sets of patients that say, actually, that's not the case. It's better for you if you use the cannabis, which of course those cannabis enthusiasts in the world have known for a long time, because we have endocannabinoid systems, because we evolved with this plant, because this plant has been part of our food system, part of our medicine system, part of our clothing system, part of our fuel system for centuries, maybe even millennia, until the government decided to come in and say, oh, wait a second, you can't have these homeopathic methods any longer. You can't use the plant that you've been growing on your land and making products out of it and feeding to your animals and using as medicine any longer. Instead, here's all of these pharmaceuticals and all this booze. And just like what Yessie has said here, you know what? It does do the opposite of alcohol, because alcohol is a poison. And we know that it's a poison. We know that it's a specific poison. We know that it's a central nervous system depressant. We know that it causes cancer. We know that it destroys your liver. We know that it leads to diabetes. And guess what? All of these things, they have studied side by side with cannabis and said, you know what? Cannabis doesn't do those things. So yeah, +1 to cannabis, -1 to alcohol, and we keep having these conversations about why is alcohol so legal when we know it's going to cause drunk driving, when we know it causes domestic violence, when we know it causes regular violence, when we know that it causes all different kinds of cognitive decline, when we know that it causes damage to the liver, when we know that it causes damages to the stomach and the esophagus, right? Like, we know that if you overconsume cannabis, you are not going to die. If you consume too much alcohol, it's called alcohol poisoning. You will die. Oops, you're dead, right? We know if you overconsume alcohol, you're probably going to be puking. You're going to be super hungover because your body is going to be able to metabolize it, but not as quickly as you're consuming it. That's real. right? We know that cannabis doesn't do any of those things to you, right? We know that there's, droves of citizens that are in states that have legalized programs that are moving away from alcohol and moving to cannabis because you don't have all of those same negative impacts, right? Because you don't have the hangover, right? Because you're not gaining all the weight. And, maybe you're feeling good, but you're not so uninhibited that you're yelling and screaming and acting violently. And you're certainly not using enough cannabis that you're blacking out and doing all kinds of ridiculous things, right? And as Yessie says, alcohol has its place in history and society, but it is considerably more damaging. And it really is, especially for, if we just kind of look at it as across society, the United Kingdom does a review of the societal harms, the personal harms, the family harms of all of these substances, legal and not, right? And they have found that alcohol is by far the most damaging to the individual's family and the society around the individual of all the substances. And that goes up against opiates. It goes up against, amphetamines, certainly goes up against cannabis, goes up against smoking. So there's a lot of damage that comes from that. And that damage is across a lot of things, right? So that damage can be economic damage. It can be, damage from violence. It can be damage because people don't have enough funds. It can be cognitive decline. The very intense damage. A few weeks ago we reported, hey, there's another study on cannabis and pregnancy that found, hey, no change. It was a longitudinal study watching babies that were in Ohio where their moms had consumed cannabis and reported consuming cannabis during pregnancy, and looking at them 5 years in, and were there any differences? And what they found was, there's not really any differences, which I think we have all known for a long time, because we know that babies whose moms drink booze, they come out different. Okay, baby whose moms consume cocaine, they come out different, right? Baby whose mom consumes cannabis, nobody even notices the difference. And that was a big portion of that study, was that teachers, caregivers, etc., didn't notice the difference between children who had mothers who had consumed cannabis and those who had not, right? Which, is important when we can start considering things like, if you were drinking a lot of alcohol during pregnancy, your pregnancy might have miscarried. That is how poisonous alcohol is. But, I digress. And I feel like it's important to say these things, okay? Because there are laws that make you put a label on every cannabis product that says that it's going to cause problems with fetal development. And do we have the same laws that make us do that on every can of beer? I mean, I know people are told that they shouldn't do it, but is it loudly in bold with a big bold line on it specifically on every can of beer? Is that the way it is? Let me look at that as a beer labeled with pregnancy warning. Yeah, so it says that they will take a warning, but it's dependent on the size of the container. Okay. I'm sorry. And it can be as small as 1 millimeter in size. So on a beer can, it could be illegible, right? Which is not the case on cannabis products. And alcohol is actually harmful. Cannabis products have not yet been shown to be harmful. And there's been dozens of studies that have shown that is the case, right? So it's pretty crazy there. Drink Detroit. Glad to see you here today. It is our 25th episode. We just got done reporting that a new study came out to show that actually in males, if you consume cannabis, you don't get stupid. You stay smarter over the long period of your life. So for all you cannabis consuming males out there that have been told the exact opposite, I think you could probably have an opportunity to say to your moms or all those naysayers out there, well, actually, I'm going to end up being smarter, not less smart. If you felt like it, right? You can point them to the study and really be able to show it. And also it was found, okay, so they lost less, okay, than everyone else. Everyone else lost about 6 IQ points over that time, which doesn't seem like a lot, but the difference between reading and not reading, I guess, is not very many IQ points. And And what they found was for the cannabis use, it was, you know, like 2 points less than that, which is pretty great, I think. If you guys are here and you're catching Pokemon because you love Pokemon, there is a Pokemon currently available to be catched in the chat. Feel free, Twitch followers, to do that. All right, so I feel like that's great, and I'm glad that I got to be able to share that with you guys. So the next item that I would really like to talk to you about is that the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association is having a gala next week. It's a nice time for us all to get together and put on our very fancy duds and go mingle and talk about the year and how it went and what next year is going to look like. Looks like there's still some tickets available. It is next week. It's at the Motor City Casino down in Detroit. Should be a blast. I will be there. You could meet me in person if you were so inclined to come say hello. You could come talk to me at the gala. I will be there. You know, if you want more information about that, you can hit me up. Also happening next week on the same day is the next public meeting of the CRA. So an opportunity to come out, and if you're in Michigan, tell the regulators what you think. Are they doing a good job? Or are they doing a bad job? Do you need help? Do you not? I have seen everything from licensed operators to consumer advocacy groups like my own to, you know, the Chamber of Commerce and individuals from cities and churches come and tell the CRA what's happening and what they need. They actually care. Oftentimes you do get a response from them. Not always. I've recently heard that some people don't get any responses at all, but they are pretty good about that. Okay. I would like to be able to go over some more pages of the public proposed rules. Okay, guys, we have received them. Now we're in public comment, so you can start submitting written comments. You should be, if you are a cannabis operator or a cannabis consumer in the state of Michigan and you have not started reading these proposed rules, you need to be asking yourself why. These are the rules that dictate how your business can operate, how you can purchase cannabis from a business. Okay? And the rules are changing, and not in small amounts. Entire segments of the rules have been scrapped and completely rewritten. Okay? It's important to look at them and say, is this going to impact my business? Is this going to impact my access? Right? Are costs going to go up? Will I not be able to afford to pay my employees? Will I not be able to afford to buy my weed? These are all important things, and so every week we're going to go over some documents. It is about a 55-page document. Am I wrong? Is it much more than that? I am so wrong. It's 192 pages long. What the hell, people? Okay. A lot of it is actually just where they've unwritten it. So it's shorter than that. It's like a 75-page document if you get rid of all the text that they're taking out. But I would like to go over page by page. Let's see if we can get through 10 to 20 pages today. And, you know, feel free to follow along. You can find this. Let's see here. I think I have a link so you guys can see it. And I will put it in the chat. Yep. Man, why am I having difficulty finding the link right now? Okay. Here is the link. All right, so if you guys want to follow along, feel free. Here is the link. It takes you to the rule set. It is there. You can see it in Word. You can review it. Not a problem. I think anyway. All right, so let's go ahead. Last time, okay, we were on, I think, page 10. All right, so let's try to get to page 30. All right, so part 2, which, by the way, Derek Sova gave a presentation on this on Wednesday, which I believe you can also go out and get from the video log. They're pretty good about putting the videos up pretty fast. I want to see the videos. Video library. Okay. Nope, it doesn't look like it's up yet. Okay, so it's not up yet. When it gets up, well, it'll be up. I'll share it with you guys next week. Okay, but Derek Sova did come out and he spent like 2 hours with telling people what was happening, what's happening in each part, and why they made changes, and what they thought were the biggest changes just this past Wednesday. Okay, just a couple days ago. And there was a lot in there. There was a lot of questions that he answered. There was a lot of people who asked questions that couldn't get answered during the question and answer session. I don't think he anticipated that it was people were going to have that many questions. Or maybe he did, and he knew he could give it 2 hours, and that was what he was going to be able to do. In any case, each section has different things. The big portion here is part 2, applications and licensing. So they scrapped the entire thing and have created a new one. Okay? And I know that sounds crazy, but that is the case. So previously, there was a fee, but it wasn't clearly called out. Now there's a fee. It's $3,000. You have to pay an application fee, apparently to defray the costs associated with the background investigation. I feel like $3,000 for a background investigation is a little crazy, but maybe that's just me. We pay so many people, all right, because you're gonna pay your city like $5,000. You're gonna pay them like $3,000. You're gonna pay like $25,000 for your actual license, as though that's not enough. But hey, whatever. They're just gonna keep saying that they need more money, and then they're gonna fine us more for different things, and then we're gonna pay taxes, which is 10% of $3.2 billion is what? $320 million. So it's not like we aren't contributing, okay, as operators and consumers in the state. So that is that's a change. It's a change from language. It's not a huge change in that there always had to be submitting them. But it is a change saying, now it's a specific amount that's written in, where before it just said that they would do that. And so I guess it's nice to have it be specific. I wonder as well if this counts for every supplemental applicant or if it's only for entities, which matters. And I feel like it matters because these qualifications expire, right? So, the pre-qualification status doesn't last forever. And the rest of the application process is, pretty long. So they've also codified some other things that I feel like were already there, but now they're just worded in a different way. I'm not entirely sure why they decided that they needed to scrap the whole thing and rewrite it in a different way, but that's what they've done. I think something else that's here is how they talk about that they're going to be doing these background investigations, and how they're no longer talking about the difference between pre-qualification for medical and pre-qualification for adult use license holders. Okay, so that's the section on licensing. They scrapped the entire section on pre-qualification requirements and wrote a new one as well. This is the kind of stuff that we all love, right? We love talking about ridiculous changes to regulations. Okay, it's probably not ridiculous, but I had a lot of people be like, why did they, make so many sweeping changes, right? Because all of us have written our SOPs and our internal policies to match what the language said. Now it's different. How different is it? We have to evaluate the whole thing. They've given us a little bit of extra time, probably an extra 2 or 3 weeks to be able to review this document than we would have otherwise received, which I can appreciate, and also during the holidays, which, doesn't seem like it's actually extra time because most people are busy. But that is the case. And, I wonder how, I'm not hearing a lot of other people talking about these rules. Okay. And does that mean other people haven't really started digging into them? I mean, I'm going line by line. I'm sharing it line by line with you guys, what's happened and why. And I'll probably go over it 3 or 4 more times because it matters to me. It matters to my customers. It matters to me as a licensed, a supplemental applicant, how things are going to change, right? And it should matter to you as a consumer because, those changes can mean some pretty big changes to things like whether products are going to be available in the state of Michigan or not. One of the changes they had was specific to edibles and how dosing can happen. There's a lot of people out there that, want higher dose products. The agency has said that a dose is 10 milligrams or below. So you're having a multi-dose product if you're getting more than 10 milligrams. And, they're saying now that, okay, now a person who's going to provide that to you has to provide it in a way that it's easier for you to cut those products in pieces, which is all well and good, okay? But how much more are they going to charge you? Because now they have to do that, if you're wanting to consume, a 200 milligram chocolate, I don't, but some people do. Now they're saying that it has to be easily cut into 20 pieces. Easy enough for you to do it, and that the test results are still consistent, right? I mean, that's a completely different style of chocolate, right? Same thing with a gummy. What if you were interested in, say, eating a bag of almonds, okay? And the bag has 20 doses in it. And currently it says, okay, with 20 doses, you can, just eat a 20th of the bag or whatever. Okay. And now, they have to either segment them out into individual doses or provide a tool for doing that segmentation. So now they have to include like a little cup that you're going to pour your infused nuts into. Are they going to do that? Or a scoop that you're going to scoop your nuts out with, right? It seems basic, but now somebody has to put that scoop in your package, and that scoop has to exist. Somebody had to buy that scoop. Where does that cost go? Most manufacturers don't just eat costs, okay? They pass them on to consumers, right? So now how much more are your nuts going to be? If it's only 10 cents, great. But, I don't feel like changes like this are ever that cheap. When I hear operators do talk about these kinds of things, they're talking about, tens of thousands or millions of dollars to make these changes. And I feel like that's important. We got a comment here from Drake Detroit. From my perspective, lots of people who should be reading the rules are not. I agree. I wonder who is reading them. Not everyone thinks this stuff is interesting or worth digging into. As always, thank you for doing the heavy lifting for those who otherwise can't. I appreciate that. I agree. There's a lot going on. And, the government right now is trying to make some pretty big changes, right? Let's see. Representative Wilson submitted a bill to deschedule cannabis in the Michigan Controlled Substance Act today. Next week, we could be seeing a lot of people voting on getting rid of the hemp bill, which was submitted for repeal back in May. There's a possibility that we will see changes to MRTMA, right? Because there were a lot of changes that were submitted also back in May that haven't been voted down yet and are still on the docket to be finished at the end of the year. There's things like, are we going to lower the age of that people can work at cannabis companies, right? I think they were proposing to lower the age from 21 down to 19, right? The changes to MRTMA were pretty sweeping, right? This is a bill that's already there. It's already a committee, and it's literally taking the MMFLA, which is medical licensing, and merging it with MRTMA, which is adult use licensing, making it one thing so there are no longer medical only licenses, which for some locations, okay, for some locales, for some municipalities, for some townships, they only allow medical. So now they're going to have to decide, do they want to allow the new provisioning centers, which are only for patients, right, but are going to be receiving the same products that recreational places receive. Right? I mean, these are some pretty significant changes that happen in the legislature. These kinds of rules changes also happen, and they can change your access. They can change, your favorite dispensary is all of a sudden, it has to go away because they change the rules and it's too close to another type of business that they say that they don't want it to be around anymore. Or completely, all products that you really want to have access to go away. Right now, the hemp bill that they're trying to repeal for Michigan, right? So the hemp bill of 2020, Industrial Hemp Act, that would remove all kinds of products from Michigan and put us up at the federal rules. And the federal rules are drastically different. One of the rules in the draft rules that we're talking about today is on what kind of gummies or other edibles, beverages, etc. that you could have that are hemp-based, okay? Let's talk a little bit more about that. I feel like maybe that's something people would be interested in. Okay, so if we go and we say, hey, hemp, and we look it up, and we come in and we say, I think it's in the industrial hemp rules, right? For like, there's a whole section on this, and there's a new section here on how it will be tested, how the lab will do the testing, how industrial hemp will be processed, right? Which currently says that a processor under the FLA may obtain, process, market, broker hemp, right? That's what it says. And they're also saying no change at all to allow people under MRTMA to do it. So consider this, okay? Right now the rules say only medical folks can do it. All right? And they're trying to get rid of the MMFLA by merging it with MRTMA. Will these rules change again? Or will they say, hey, well, actually, there's no medical anymore, so there's no reason for you to be allowed to process industrial hemp, right? I feel like that's a pretty big thing. Then there's a whole nother thing in here about selling industrial hemp. And in order for marijuana sales locations to do that, they have to have an industrial hemp processor handler license, which, again, that entire section of the statute is being removed. It's being repealed. It was filed for repeal in May, right? And yet here we are where it says, hey, you will do this. You have to have a hemp handler processor license. There is no hemp handler processor license without the industrial hemp rules, right? Because USDA is for growing, not for processing. So then now you can't do it anymore, right? I mean, it's pretty crazy, honestly, how some of these things are changing and why more people aren't up in arms about it. Right? I'm just adding a note here because I'm reviewing this live with you guys, right? Okay. So another part in here that I thought was really interesting, and I feel like this is super important. It is literally the last page, okay? Page 192, guys. Section R420, because 420 for cannabis, .1005, THC limits in industrial hemp products. Okay? An industrial hemp product, defined above, must not contain more THC than any of the following. 1 3/4 milligrams per serving, 10 milligrams per package, and 1/15 of the amount of CBD. Okay? So that means in order for you to have a 10 milligram package, it has to be 10 milligrams, what is it, a 15th? 10. So you have to have 150 milligrams of CBD to get 10 milligrams in your package of THC in industrial hemp product. How many products are on the market today, right now, that you, as a consumer in the state of Michigan, are consuming, that you are purchasing over the internet, having drop shipped to your house legally under the Federal Farm Bill of 2018 that changed the rules for hemp, that allowed you to have products that have 0.3% or less THC in them, that you will no longer have access to because those products will no longer exist under this rule, or they will be radically changed. And how much more expensive will it be for you to have a beverage that has 150 milligrams of CBD in it so that you can get 10 milligrams of THC? Ask yourself that, okay? And if you're not, you should consider why you don't care, okay? Because if these are the products that you're using today, if you don't know what's in your product today, that's a whole other issue, okay? But if these are products that you're buying today, if you're getting if you're buying 1906 nutraceuticals, okay? If you're buying Can, okay? Can would no longer be allowed because it has more milligrams per serving, okay? That doesn't have enough CBD in it. That's reality. Okay, and these are products that have been available in the Michigan marketplace and are available all over the country legally today that will no longer be allowed to be legally sold in the state of Michigan with the change in this rule. Drake Detroit says, these laws were always supposed to protect access, and it seems like they are actively doing the exact opposite. You know, I agree. I feel like my experience with how the rules have changed in the short time that I've been in Michigan, which is now 4 years, is that across the board, the rules are, looking at us like we're criminals, looking at consumers like they're criminals, looking at consumers like consumers don't actually know what they want. Every time I see somebody say, "Oh, well, really, you should be able to have more than 10 milligrams," I think about people like my wife. She needs 20 milligrams multiple times a day. She's a medical user. Okay, 10 milligrams is still the dose, which means either she's having to consume more physical calories or substances with her edibles, or she has to get it a different way, or I have to make it for at home, which is honestly what I do. Okay, because whatever, it's not hard to make edibles. Or at least for me, it's not hard to make edibles, right? And that is not okay, right? We shouldn't have to consume an entire bag of gummies to get what you're trying to get to because the agency is like, 10 milligrams seems reasonable, right? I mean, you can't overdose on THC. You can have bad experiences and there are adverse events, but you're not gonna die, right? So it's confusing to me why it's like that. And it's frustrating to me that the agency continues to do things like that and continues to say, "Oh, we're doing all this stuff to get, traditional market operators to stop doing that," as though these neighborhood growers were ever, the problem to begin with, right? It was never neighborhood growers that were the problem, right? It was prohibitionist mindset. It was demonizing substances that didn't need to be demonized. It was treating some substances like alcohol as though they're safe, while clearly not, and others as though, it's just going to kill people, which, cannabis isn't going to do, right? So, I get frustrated about those kinds of things. I understand that, it's going to take a long time to get the rules to change, but here's a place, right? 1 3/4 milligrams per serving. Why? Anybody? Why? Why is that what they decided? Science at all? Any science? Because I'm saying no science at all. 10 milligrams per package. Okay, so whatever. 10 milligrams is something that they've been focused on for a long time. They're always talking about it. Okay. 1/15 the amount of CBD that is an industrial hemp product. Okay. Hello, not all hemp products contain CBD. What about CBG? What about CBC? Okay. What about people who don't want to have any CBD or CBG or CBC in their product and they just want to have THC? They want a small amount of it, which is legally allowed hemp product currently. What if they want that? Right? These are the kinds of questions that I think we should all be asking, right? How did they make this decision? Because when people make decisions without there being any science, they make poor decisions. And they can then continue to make poor decisions with no science, no good reasoning behind how they're doing it. They're just like, well, today I felt like less than 2 milligrams was reasonable. Because why? Do we think that less than 2 milligrams per serving is going to have people not have a THC response to the substance? Because there are definitely people out there that a 2 milligram dose would be more than enough to get them high, right? So why are they asking for this? Okay. Drake Retort asks, why is Michigan so progressive with marijuana laws, but they are so overreaching with the laws against federally legal hemp and go way past what the USDA requires? I think this is an excellent question. We have probably one of the best programs, even though I get frustrated with the rules and, I don't like how we have to pay to play so much. And I'm concerned that traditional market operators who are trying to become licensed are still being left out in the cold because they're still being treated like criminals, because every licensed operator is treated like a criminal, including having to sign an affidavit that says that they know that they are a criminal, right? So, those kinds of things are frustrating for me. I feel like for hemp products that it's really all about people who have been bringing hemp products into the state and competing with licensed operators. Right? Which has been an issue. 3 years ago, they wanted to get rid of caregivers because caregivers were competing with licensed operators. Licensed operators don't want to compete with traditional market operators, who, by the way, have been there for centuries and decades. It's generational, right? These people are the reason why we have cannabis today, but let's get rid of them because reasons, right? They don't want anybody to have those opportunities. They want it to be very controlled, and they certainly want to make money off of it. Again, $350 million in tax revenue. Well, guess what? These products don't have any of that. And if, a lot of places across the country, all of them, actually, I don't think there is a single one. Somebody fact check me on that. I don't think there's a single program that's out there that is not overtly taxing cannabis and cannabis users and cannabis operators to do this work, right? Brandy, thank you for joining us today. Brandy says, I think this area is lobbied by the industry and that feels threatened by the less regulated hemp producers. You know what? I think that it's possible that that's the case. I think that the idea of self-regulation is something that I have pushed for about a decade now, being in the industry. And I think that there's a lot of not self-regulating. So there maybe is like a public health concern. And I think 100% that everybody feels threatened by everybody, right? It's not just licensed operators feel threatened by hemp operators and by caregivers and by, traditional market folks that are bringing out-of-state stuff in. They also feel threatened by every new license holder, by the grow that is 2 blocks away from them, right? And everybody feels that way because so much of what's happening in the industry right now is super negative because people are literally losing their shirts. There are huge, amazing, state-of-the-art cultivation facilities that are being shut down every day right now because competition is so fierce, right? Now, I've said it dozens of times. I'll say it again today. Not everybody was always going to make it, okay? Less than 50% of businesses succeed. There are a lot of cannabis businesses in Michigan. There's not been a lot of failures yet. That means a lot more people have to fail before we get to any kind of equilibrium. It's not anything anybody wants to hear. I hate to be the one to keep having to say it, but it's the truth. All right? So, I feel like nobody is people keep being like, oh my God, oversupply. And then there's another 100 licenses that are issued, right? So until people are like, whoa, maybe this is not actually a business model that's going to work for everyone and we're all going to get rich quick, which 100% was what everybody and their brother was saying 10 years ago. And even when I first got to Michigan, recreational sales were just getting ready to be to happen. And everybody and their brother was like, oh, these prices are going to be so amazing. And at the time, like an ounce was like $500, which was insane because you could literally buy the same ounce from your hairdresser for like $250 or $200, right? Like, so we should have known then, right? Like if the traditional market guy wasn't selling it for $500, it was never going to be $500 for long, right? We have all these multi-state operators that had come to Michigan to like be here for when adult use sales took on that are leaving the state for newer states like Maryland, right? Like Nebraska, where new programs are being put in place right now where they know that because of federal prohibition, they can get a bigger dollar from consumers for a short period of time. But the crappy part about that is that consumers always had the option, right? Traditional market growers were always there. They were always there to give people substances. But we continue to demonize them, right? And act like these traditional market folks that have literally been saving people's lives under the radar, like with no accolades or thanks for decades, right? Those folks are being left out over and over again. Most of the states that legalize cannabis don't even let people who have traditionally been in the market, especially if they had law enforcement encounters, join the marketplace. They're only allowing it for well-funded, existing business people, right? So our person who already owns a business, who already has $1 million in their pocket, is that your neighborhood grower? Certainly wasn't mine. Okay, so let's go back up to some other parts now that we've talked about hemp a bit. Oh, Drake Detroit says, it's terribly hypocritical for the marijuana folks to act like hemp requires more scrutiny because marijuana operators can't maintain profitability. It makes us all look like some fools. Yes, it does. And it's worse than making people look like fools, okay? When we are fighting each other over the plant because of dollars, it takes our eyes off the prohibitionists that want us all to be in jail or to be killed for this plant. Okay? And those people still exist. They're alive and well. On Monday, a lot of them gave testimony with dates when they're going to be able to give more testimony for the DEA's rescheduling hearing. Okay, because the first hearing happened on Monday. And they said it over and over again. I'm against this, I'm against this, I'm against this, I'm against this. You know, a dozen of them got up and said that. There was a handful of people who were able to say that they had standing to speak that were not against rescheduling, right? And so every person who's out there being like, oh, we shouldn't have access to THC because reasons. Really? That's what the prohibitionists say. You want to line up with them today? Well, okay then. You know, I'm not going to stand next to you and say that. That's ridiculous, right? I don't think that a hemp operator who's considering the safety of the patient and the consumer is any different than a poorly regulated, okay, cannabis operator in a licensed state that's using a fraudulent test lab to say that their cannabis and their products that they're making are just as safe, okay? Having crappy testing and paying a license fee, so paying to play, is just as bad, okay, as a hemp operator who's actually a GMP certified, doing it the right way, making good products in a clean facility, doing lots of testing that's not even mandated, okay? And there are a lot of producers that are out there just like that. I know some. If you don't believe me, I will introduce you to them, okay? These people are the salt of the earth, making products, helping their communities grow, like OMG, creating bakeries, giving away free food, getting farmland that hadn't been used for decades back into production, right? Those people exist, and trying to lump everybody in and say, oh no, these guys, you know, they're just creating unsafe products. Really? When was the last time you saw a actually safe product? Like where you could have said, this was a hemp product, and this was a licensed facility product. Let's look at these two and compare them, right? You know, I hear, oh, there's all these pesticides. Yeah? What pesticide was it? Oh, we don't test for that one? You don't think that's in all the products in Michigan? That since we're not testing for it, it's definitely there. How do we know? Because back in February, we tested for them, and sure enough, they were there in licensed products in the state of Michigan, right? So all of these things, like, always makes us look foolish, makes us look like we don't know what we're trying to do, makes us look like for decades what they were saying is that, oh, these people, you know, they're just in it for money, and you know, they'll eat each other. It's dog eat dog in the cannabis world, right? They're so violent. Well, yeah, when we act like this, sure makes it seem like they were right, doesn't it? And I wish that we wouldn't. All right, so we're coming on the end of the hour here, guys. We've made it like, we got through like 11 pages. Whoa, go team! Super excited about that. I feel like there is a big portion that I did ask about, and I know I mentioned it last time, which is if you have a landlord and your landlord is currently making more than 10% of what you make, okay, right? Your revenue, making more than 10% of your revenue, they may have just become a supplemental applicant. You should be talking to them because getting them through the process and making sure they're happy with it and all of the pretty intense review that happens by the agency takes about 45 days. Okay, so first you have to convince them that they're going to do it. Then you got to have 45 days. Got to do a complex amendment. You got to submit all that documentation. It's going to take a while, so be prepared. All right, we're going to go ahead and end on like this page here, which goes right into the kinds of capitalization, okay, needed for the MMFLA, which I'm sad to say has not gone down at all. I was kind of hoping that they would have started to be a little bit more reasonable, but nope, they have not. So, okay. All right. Well, are there any more questions from the audience? Any more comments? It seems like we're probably done with all of that. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for coming in. Drake Detroit and Brandy Detroit. It's nice to have some Detroiters on the show. I am super glad that you guys are here. I'm glad Yessie, thank you so much for coming. This was my 25th show. Yessie was here on the first show. He's here on my 25th show. Can you believe 25 shows later? That's like a half a year. I mean, I'm feeling pretty great about it. I got my new logo, which will be on the goodbye screen as well, guys. I'm super excited about it. Thank you, Vivian Wilder, for putting that together for me. With Wilder Dreams. It is gorgeous, and I am glad for it. Okay. All right. Well, then in that case, everyone, I don't see any more questions coming in. We were able to talk about a lot of different changes coming up in the new proposed rules. Looking forward to hearing questions from other people. Feel free to send them to me, email them to me, drop them on my LinkedIn. Swing by and leave a comment on the Twitch stream or the YouTube. I'm here. I'm reading them. I am trying to add them into my stream. If you are so inclined, swing by my Patreon. There is a survey that you can complete there. I need one more person to complete the survey, and then we're going to take a look and see if we want to add something else to line up. It looks like right now the one thing we're going to be adding, unless a couple other people vote in a different direction, is talking about strain diversity, talking about phenos, talking about different kinds of plants and how those plants work best. So I'm excited about maybe doing that. I know a lot of really amazing growers, a lot of good breeders. I love talking about the historical lineage of these plants, the land races that exist, and how people are bringing back some land races as they kind of, the footprint around the world gets a little simpler. We can move seeds, which we weren't able to do for so long because they were outlawed. All right. Well, thank you guys. I'll send you guys to the outtake. Hope that you have a really good weekend, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon.